Information processing is an important component of learning and memory. In fact, if new information isn't processed, it won't lead to permanent new memories, and learning will simply not occur. On the other hand, the more extensively new information is processed, the better it'll be remembered. The steps involved in the import and processing of new information is summarized in what we refer to as the information processing model. Let's consider this model. In essence, the input arrow indicates new information entering the brain. Now, most information that we are presented with never makes it to the learning pathway and is lost. This is indicated by the downward arrow on the left, leading to forgotten. We constantly receive an enormous amount of information, literally thousands of stimuli per second. And we can't process all this information at one time. Consider, just for an example, the feel of your right foot at the very moment that I'm speaking. Now, in all likelihood, you weren't thinking about your right foot at all until I brought it up. However, now that you're thinking about it, you can sense it, and you can sense information being sent from it to your brain. For example, its position relative to the rest of your body. Obviously, it would be very difficult to concentrate on anything else if we spent all of our time with information coming from our right foot, let alone the rest of our body and all of the environment. New information that does enter the brain is available temporarily in working or short-term memory, where it may either be further processed into long-term memory or lost and forgotten. This is indicated by the second arrow leading to forgotten. Information is not stored in short-term memory for very long, as the name implies, perhaps only a few seconds or minutes. It's either processed or lost forever. Not only is the storage of information in short-term memory brief, but it's also very limited in capacity. We can only place a few bits of new information into short-term memory before it's filled, and new information begins to replace previously stored information. Somewhat like when we overfill a glass of water. This is essentially what happens when we're trying to memorize a telephone number, for example, and someone comes up and talks to us, and we completely forget the number. Essentially, we're replacing the number in our short-term memory with the new information that the person has given us. The conversion of new information from short-term memory to long-term memory requires a very important process, and this process is called consolidation. As suggested by the information processing model, consolidation is a complex process involving the comparison of new information in short-term memory with previous knowledge through the retrieval of related information from long-term memory. Virtually no new information is consolidated without first comparing it to information that we already have. When thinking of short-term and long-term memory, sometimes it's convenient to consider the analogy of a university library. When we first enter the library, we come to the Periodical Room. And this is a room where we have the most recent issues of periodicals, magazines, and newspapers that are readily available to anyone who wants to use them. However, they're not stored in the Periodical Room very long. This is analogous to short-term memory. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is more like the stacks of the library, the countless floors and rows of old journals and books, journals that are bound together, organized in some fashion, date, chronological order, alphabetical order, and are stored for long-term reference. Not only is there a tremendous amount of information, but this information can be very old indeed. And very much like the old stacks in the library, every now and then we come across a memory from our long-term memory that we've just completely forgotten that we even knew. Events, even faces that we haven't thought of for years. And what about the transfer of information from short-term to long-term memory? Does the library analogy still hold? How can we consider consolidation? Well, in any library, the way that information or periodicals are moved from the reading room where they're on short-term display to the long-term display of the stacks is by a librarian. And so, in our analogy, the librarian represents consolidation. Next, let's talk about retrieval. Every bit of new information will be compared to old information already stored in long-term memory banks. Retrieval in the library analogy is pretty straightforward. It's represented by the card catalog in the old days or the computer terminal today.